The story begins with our female protagonist, Jung-min, experiencing a lucid dream. A lucid dream is when a person is aware that they are dreaming and can control their actions within the dream. In the same way, in her dream, Jung-min is the class president at her school. When the lesson ends, her friends gather around her desk and ask what she's doing after school. Jung-min smiles and tells them that she has nothing planned. Her friends invite her to buy some makeup with them later, and Jung-min offers to treat them to dinner using her mother's card. Jung-min's friends all admire her and wish they had a life like hers. However, Jung-min notices another girl, Joo-hyun. In Jung-min's dream, Joo-hyun has no friends and is ridiculed by everyone, including Jung-min's friends. As people whisper around Joo-hyun, she bites her thumb in frustration, causing it to bleed. Jung-min stares at Joo-hyun for a while and then grins wickedly, calling her filthy. Hearing this, Joo-hyun stops biting her finger and looks back, glaring hard at Jung-min. Her friends angrily order Joo-hyun to keep her eyes down. Jung-min smirks and approaches Joo-hyun. She swiftly snatches Joo-hyun's mobile. Joo-hyun tries to take it back, but Jung-min holds her back, checking her phone. When she finds what she was looking for, she chuckles. She shows Joo-hyun the mobile screen, causing her to freeze in her tracks. Joo-hyun had posted insulting and crude remarks about her classmates and Jung-min. Jung-min shows the messages to her friends, and they are shocked. On the other hand, Joo-hyun is sweating profusely after being caught red-handed. All of a sudden, Jung-min smacks Joo-hyun's face hard. Everyone in the class started to look at Joo-hyun, laughing while she held her face, trembling. Jung-min asks Joo-hyun if she thinks it is unfair to her. She approaches Joo-hyun more closely and whispers in her ear that even though they picked on and publicly humiliated her first, doesn't she do the exact same thing to her every day? It's morning by now, and Jung-min wakes up and goes back to reality. She gets ready for school and shakes her piggy bank. She has used up everything and it is now empty. She feels woozy since she can't even eat now because of those scumbags. In reality, she didn't like going to school. When she arrives at school, she sees Joo-hyun and her friends happily talking. They look at her as she enters the classroom and starts whispering to each other, looking at Jung-min mockingly. This makes Jung-min tremble in annoyance. She makes herself remember that they are nobodies in her dream and calmly sits at her desk. Joo-hyun and her group approach Jung-min and start to intentionally gossip about her in front of her. Joo-hyun talks about how smelly it is around her, making others laugh. Jung-min bites her lower lip in rage. In the real world, Joo-hyun was the class president, whereas Jung-min is a loner with no friends. Unlike her dream, she is the one who gets bullied every day by Joo-hyun and her friends. As soon as the first class ends, Jung-min walks to the bathroom. But she finds a lot of people there and decides to go to the teacher's restroom on the first floor. She reaches there and shuts herself in a stall. Her life is pretty tough right now, but she is determined that everything will turn out fine in the end. After all, it's just high school. She knows this, but still doesn't feel good. She is unable to stand up for herself and deal with those bullies except through lucid dreaming. She uses it to put Joo-hyun in her place and torture her the same way she does. That's the only solution she has to relieve her stress. Joo-hyun Ha is the one who turned Jung-min into an outcast, even though they were best friends in elementary school. She remembers the events that led her to her present misery. Back then, Joo-hyun had no friends, so Jung-min became friends with her despite her friends telling her how Joo-hyun is known for her tough personality and treating people badly. They tell her that Joo-hyun pretends to be strong and becomes clingy, but Jung-min ignored their advice. Since then, Joo-hyun and Jung-min have quickly become friends. The two stuck to each other like glue. But one day, Joo-hyun received an odd request from Jung-min. She asked Jung-min to stop hanging out with her other friends since they were losers and to only hang out with her. Joo-hyun wasn't like that when Jung-min first met her, but that must be because she has now gotten comfortable with Jung-min. And as the days passed by, Joo-hyun started revealing her true nature in front of her. Jung-min just wanted to play with all her friends, not just Joo-hyun. It was then that she realized that all the rumors her friends had told about Joo-hyun seemed to be true. One day, Joo-hyun asks Jung-min to let her draw on her face to make her look pretty. Even though Jung-min protested that their teacher would scold her, Joo-hyun finally got her way. When her friends saw her face, they were shocked and asked her what was wrong with it. Seeing Jung-min's sad face, her friends instantly figured out that it was Joo-hyun's doing. Jung-min started to cry and confessed that Joo-hyun had told her not to play with them and that she now doesn't know what to do. Her friends advised her to cut off Yu Hyun since she doesn't like her anymore. Jongmin tried to argue, but her friends assured her that there was nothing to worry about, as they would be with her. Jongmin knew her friends were right. The truth was that she was scared of Ju Hyun. As her friends had told her, Ju Hyun's personality was a bit strange, which she didn't like. Hence, Jongmin went to class with her friends to confront Ju Hyun. Seeing Jongmin, Ju Hyun asked why she removed the drawing she made. But before Ju Hyun could approach Jongmin, her friends covered her, making Ju Hyun frown in anger. Ju Hyun still tried to approach Jongmin, but one of Jongmin's friends shoved her back and told her not to hang out with her anymore. They confronted Ju Hyun about how she had told Jongmin not to play with them. Ju Hyun asked Jongmin if she told them everything, even her backstory. Jongmin looked up at her in wonder. Before she could say anything to Ju Hyun, her friends declared that Jongmin didn't feel comfortable with her and that she should leave her alone from then on. Ju Hyun didn't say another word as they all left. Jongmin turned back to see Ju Hyun in worry, but her eyes widened instantly. She was startled to see Ju Hyun looking at her with eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and hurt. Since then, Ju Hyun had never spoken to Jongmin again, contrary to what she had expected. After graduating from elementary school, Jongmin spent her middle school years as normal. When she got to high school, Ju Hyun had already become one of those kids in school who no one could dare ignore, whereas Jongmin had turned out to be a loner. When Jongmin saw Ju Hyun on the very first day of high school, she expected her to use her popularity against her. But Ju Hyun had ignored her as if she didn't even recognize her, surprising Jongmin. It seemed better for Jongmin that Ju Hyun didn't recognize her, but she still can't forget the expression she made when she looked at her that day. To Jongmin, it seemed like Ju Hyun was living a good life. As the first class started, the teacher instructed the students to start stretching by pairing up. All the other students were excited to pair up, but Jongmin wasn't. She felt like everyone had paired up, and she was the only one who didn't have a friend. It seemed awkward for her, and she worried about what would happen if everyone thought she was weird. Suddenly, Jongmin heard someone laughing at her, making her eyes widen. She turned to see that it was Ju Hyun and her friend, looking at her with disdain. They remarked that it was pathetic for her to be standing all alone, and Ju Hyun whispered something in her friend's ear, making her laugh at Jongmin. Jongmin was confused and wondered if Ju Hyun was talking about her. That sudden realization made her feel extremely self-conscious and insecure. It only meant that Ju Hyun remembered her and was indeed gossiping about her. At that moment, she could feel it with her whole body, the feeling that her high school was screwed. The very next day, Ju Hyun's friends approached her desk and asked if she was a loser who bullied Ju Hyun in elementary school. Hearing their words, Jongmin was shocked. She looked at the other side of the room and saw Ju Hyun, wondering if she had told them everything. Ju Hyun smirked, confirming Jongmin's doubts, and tears streamed down her cheeks. Ju Hyun's friend swiftly snatched Jongmin's mobile and asked her how much data she had. One of them opened her music playlist and mocked her old-fashioned taste. She told the other that Jongmin hadn't used much of her data. This surprised the other girl since it was already the middle of the month. Jongmin glared at them and asked them to give her mobile back. She had been saving her data because she didn't have that much. But Ju Hyun's friends mocked her, saying she didn't need data since she doesn't have any friends to chat with anyway. They asked her to pretend that she was donating it, making Jongmin tremble in fear. They walked away after threatening her not to turn off her hotspot. Back then, Jongmin didn't understand why she was being treated like this. After that, the other classmates started to avoid her out of fear of Ju Hyun. And that was the beginning of what Ju Hyun would do to Jongmin. She was publicly humiliated and bullied every day by her classmates. She couldn't understand what she did to Ju Hyun or why she was being punished like this. Therefore, Jongmin sought help on social media, where someone advised her to talk to her parents. So she tried to talk with her mother, but she retaliated. Her mother was an alcoholic, and Jongmin didn't think her mother would care since she didn't even take care of herself, as her whole body was covered in bruises. That night, as she scrolled through the internet, she found a site on lucid dreaming. The idea of doing things in her dreams that she can't do in real life piqued her curiosity, and she scrolled further. She finally realized that she could do anything she wanted in her dreams now. She found two major ways to successfully lucid dreams. The first was to recognize that you are dreaming as you sleep, and then begin lucid dreaming. The other way was to fall asleep with the intent of having a lucid dream and quickly enter one. The second method could have side effects for someone attempting to lucid dream for the first time, but Jongmin doesn't care. The only thing she wanted was to escape from her screwed-up reality as soon as she could. So she tried to lucid dream, and she found herself in one. She noticed that she was in her classroom. At first, she didn't get what was happening, but then she realized she was lucid dreaming. She looked at her hands, confirming if she was dreaming since everything felt quite realistic. She wondered if it was because it was the first time she was doing this. She noticed the other students in class, but found it difficult to see their faces in detail. She found it natural because she hadn't really seen their faces or heard their names before. But then she noticed Ju-hyun, and her eyes widened. She was able to see her face quite clearly. Jongmin wasted no time and started to talk to her. She confessed that when she got to high school and saw her, she was happy to see her surrounded by people, unlike in grade school. Even though Ju-hyun's personality was crap, Jongmin still felt guilty for cutting her off, and her cruel behavior doesn't seem justifiable to Jongmin. She asked her, what did she do to her that was so wrong? But Ju-hyun didn't say anything. This infuriated Jongmin more, and she swiftly grabbed Ju-hyun and demanded she says something. Once she began saying everything she could never say in reality, words kept pouring out of her. She continued to confront Ju-hyun, saying that her school life had turned miserable because of her. Jongmin knew that the Ju-hyun in front of her wasn't really her, which only made her more frustrated. She gritted her teeth and fell to her knees, not knowing if she really wanted to hear from her. After that, Jongmin started to act indifferently toward her classmates' ostracization. She had now taken comfort in lucid dreaming, where she could act out however she wanted to. Seeing Jongmin's discolored, hollow eyes, she looked creepy and dead to her classmates. It's been a week since she began lucid dreaming. Because of this, she hadn't been able to get proper sleep and was exhausted. What she found pathetic was that she had never taken any revenge on Ju-hyun at all. Instead, she just rants at her. In Jongmin's dreams, Ju-hyun didn't really speak, but that's expected. Since she was the one who controlled her dreams, there was nothing she wanted to hear from Ju-hyun, and nothing she wanted her to do. It must be because she wasn't that resentful towards her, or maybe she was scared of hitting another person. Whatever the reason, she just couldn't hit Ju-hyun, making her feel pathetic. Furthermore, things started to go downhill when Ju-hyun became the class president. As the whole class celebrated Ju-hyun's achievement, Jongmin wondered if she would also have been able to enjoy the moment with everyone if she hadn't cut her off back then. Ju-hyun woke up and found the whole class empty. She checked the time on her phone and realized that it was lunchtime. As she walked to the snack shop, she overheard Ju-hyun and her friends talking about her. Ju-hyun had told the whole class that Jongmin had bullied her in elementary school, and now they had all turned against her. That's when Jongmin realizes the reason she decided to cut off Ju-hyun back in elementary school. It was because the person Ju-hyun is right now is exactly how she was back then. She judged people even when they were all friends. She was busy looking down on people as if she thought that they were weaker than her. Or maybe that's what Jongmin wanted to believe, because who would want to be mean outright? Ju-hyun just wanted a reason to torment her, pretending to be righteous in front of others. Jongmin could understand this since she has herself fallen for Ju-hyun's trap. Ju-hyun walked back to her class when lunchtime was over. As she walked past Ju-hyun, she called Jongmin, who stopped in her tracks. Ju-hyun coldly points out that her skirt was too short. Silence filled the whole class as everyone turned to stare at Jongmin's skirt and whisper. She glares at Ju-hyun, clenching her fist in anger. Of all the things, Ju-hyun was now coming for the way Jongmin wore her skirt. For Jongmin, it was petty of her to do it. But thinking was all she could do. She ignored Ju-hyun and walked back to her desk. As a target of bullying, even the smallest expression of anger was a crime. Ju-hyun and her friends noticed her ignoring them but didn't do anything. The only thing Jongmin could do against Ju-hyun's and her classmates' bullying was to write it down on her phone. Moreover, Jongmin's health starts to deteriorate more as a side effect of lucid dreaming. Later, she fell asleep during class, and no one woke her up for the next gym class. When everyone had left the class, Ju-hyun stayed back with the excuse of going to the nurse's office to deal with her cramps. She approached the sleeping Young-min and rummaged through her desk. She found her mobile. Earlier, Joo-hyun had seen Jong-min type something on her phone and was curious to see what it was. As she unlocked Jong-min's phone, she found no lock pattern. She chuckled at Jong-min's stupidity and lax security, but it was expected since she didn't have any friends or family who would even be interested in her private life. She smiled at the sleeping Jong-min, remarking that she should have been nicer to her. Joo-hyun then quickly scrolled through her phone and found the messages she sent, bound to create controversy in class. She took a picture of the offensive messages from Jong-min's phone, adamant about making her life more miserable. After a while, Jong-min woke up abruptly and noticed her teacher scolding her for sleeping. She realized that it was already the end of the day. The teacher scolded her as her classmates snickered. She clenched her hands into fists at the realization that nobody had woken her up. As the class ended, Joo-hyun passed a smile to Jong-min, surprising her. It wasn't something Joo-hyun would do. All Joo-hyun had done to her was hide behind her friends and laugh at her. She had never talked to Jong-min before, so what was she thinking now? Meanwhile, Joo-hyun had made Jong-min's account public, unbeknownst to Jong-min, who kept posting. The next morning, the scene played out exactly like Jong-min's lucid dream later on, as shown at the start of the story. Later that night, Jong-min lay awake on her bed, determined to get revenge on Joo-hyun right away. But she suddenly heard a crashing sound outside her room and realized her father was there. She sighed as her father slammed the door. She knew her parents would soon start to fight as usual since her mother was home today, and so it began. The house fizzled with a shattering noise as Jong-min's father cursed at her mother about how she could be asleep when her husband came home and started beating her. Jong-min covered herself under a blanket, trembling. She didn't understand why her father even bothered to come home, only to get angry. She blamed him for the condition she and her mother were in. She wondered how different things would have been if she had been just a little stronger. Would she have been able to stand up to those girls? The house suddenly became quiet, and Jong-min wondered if it was all over. She was tired of it and closed her eyes. She immediately found herself in an otherworldly place. It seemed familiar to her, and then she realized it was a dream. Jong-min had lucid dreams so often now on accident that she could now quickly realize when she was in one. She saw her house in the distance and decided to try doing it. Try doing what she can never do in reality. She approached her mother's room as she continued to hear crashing sounds inside. She stepped in and saw the previous scene of her father threatening her mother replay. She cursed at her father and asked him to stop. Her father turned to look at her and clenched his teeth furiously. He asked her if his child thinks he is a joke. He cursed at Jong-min and asked her to come to him. But Jong-min ignored him, making her father angry. He raised his hand at Jong-min and threatened to beat her and her mother to death right there. But Jong-min slammed, making her father fall to the floor, and she squeezed his neck tightly. As her father gasped for breath, Jong-min continued to strangle him without an ounce of guilt. As he lay there struggling to breathe, Jong-min grinned. It was just as she had imagined. Her father couldn't even move a muscle against her, but suddenly he stopped moving. Jong-min immediately realized that she had killed him and started trembling. She woke up abruptly and realized it was all a dream. It was now morning. She had been so shocked that she forgot she was dreaming. She noticed her father coming. He looked at Jong-min and rushed to leave without uttering a single word to her. As he slammed the door behind him, Jong-min sighed in relief. She washed up but was now late for school. She was sure her homeroom teacher would scold her and humiliate her in front of the class. And so she dashed to the school, determined to even die rather than let that happen. As she reached the school building, she bumped into a boy. But since she was so late, she hastily apologized and went running. As she reached her classroom, she panted heavily. She had barely made it before the bell. She dragged herself to the class, unaware that all her classmates were staring at her. They started to whisper that she hadn't showered again, but the truth was that she had just forgotten to dry her hair. Frustrated, she hurriedly types on her account about how her classmates had nothing better to talk about. She sighs as she lets out her stress. Even she felt sorry for herself for letting out her stress by writing this kind of stuff and having no other choice. Suddenly, Joo-hyun entered the classroom, making Jong-min anxious. As Joo-hyun approached her, she shoved her phone in Jong-min's face and asked if it was her account. As Jongmin saw her private account and offensive messages on Juhyun's phone, she was stunned. She didn't understand how Juhyun had them since she set her account to private. Juhyun continued, saying that the initials and what the posts described lined up perfectly. Jongmin was sweating at this point in fear of being exposed and refused to accept that it was her account. Juhye told her the account's initials were hers and mockingly asked who else would say such kind of stuff about anyone in the class, except her. By now, the whole class was murmuring and looking at the scene unfolding. Juhyun cleared her voice and started to read Jongmin's messages out loud. Tears poured down Jongmin's cheeks and her heart pounded heavily. The whole class was shocked at the sudden revelation. Jongmin continued to refuse, so Juhyun asked her to prove her innocence. She asked Jongmin to show her phone. This made Jongmin more anxious. She turned speechless, since if Juhyun saw her phone, her crime would be revealed to everyone. Seeing her silence, Juhyun snatched Jongmin's phone. But Jongmin tried to prevent her from taking it, but failed. The scene was unfolding exactly the way Jongmin would lucid dream later on. Perhaps this was her starting point from which she set out to take revenge on Juhyun. Juhyun looked through Jongmin's phone and finally found her account. When the whole class saw this, they started whispering and calling her a freak. Jongmin bit her lower lip, trying to suppress her tears. Suddenly, Juhyun slapped Jongmin and asked if she could still say it wasn't her. Jongmin was taken aback by the insult. She was frustrated at having to undergo such evil treatment. She didn't know that it was because she had done so much wrong to deserve it. Later, she went to the teacher's office and requested to go home early. As the teacher saw her torn face, he turned speechless. He then scolded her, telling her that she can't and must take all her other classes, but got interrupted by Jongmin's sudden outburst. She shouts at him tearfully to leave her alone, just this once. Later, she started to lucid dream again. Juhyun was also there, kneeling as Jongmin announced her return. She tells Juhyun that she had thought about why she couldn't resent her all this time. It was because she was the victim here. She grabbed Juhyun's hair viciously, ready to take her revenge. Jongmin didn't know if she was allowed to do this, but she knew it was a dream, and that dreams aren't real. No matter what she did here, she wasn't doing anything wrong. Compared to Juhyun's trashy actions in real life, she felt nothing to be ashamed of, and so she stabbed Juhyun in the stomach. As Juhyun gasped for air, Jongmin looked at her with a death stare. Her eyes were cold as tears streamed down her cheeks. She smiles sadly and remarks that this is why Jongmin should have been nicer to her. Meanwhile, a white-haired boy saw the cruel scene unfold in the distance. He laughs and remarks that Jongmin was an interesting girl. In the present moment, Jongmin gets ready for school, happy. Maybe because she has released some stress from the night before and doesn't feel as bad as usual. She is now getting used to lucid dreams, and she feels less exhausted. As she enters the class, she notices Juhyun's friends asking about her worriedly. They talk about how Juhyun isn't even picking up their calls or coming to school. Jongmin sits at her desk, glad that Juhyun isn't present and hoping that she never shows up again. The class starts and the teacher enters. He announces that Juhyun's parents called the school this morning and told the administration that she is in the emergency room due to an unexpected accident. Hearing this, Jongmin's eyes widen in surprise. Juhyun's friends ask the teacher if she is sick, to which the teacher hesitates. He tells the class that, according to Juhyun's mother, she had lost consciousness and started bleeding in the middle of the night. Jongmin immediately realizes what he is talking about and freezes in shock. The whole class is shocked and starts whispering to each other. But Jongmin is still shocked to hear that Juhyun got hurt while sleeping. It doesn't make any sense to her. She had stabbed Juhyun through lucid dreaming, not in real life. She wonders how it could be possible. What if it was an effect of her lucid dreams? It seems impossible, but what if she can control Juhyun? There are times when people are desperate enough to believe that mere coincidences are miracles. The realization that she has special abilities causes Jongmin to smirk knowingly. She glances at the rest of the class and chuckles slyly. Jongmin has finally started to take revenge on Juhyun. Is Jongmin really able to control Juhyun, or is it really a foolish fantasy? Most importantly, do you think Jongmin will ever be able to confront Juhyun and stand up for herself? Who is the mystery white-haired boy she saw in her lucid dream? With this, the video ends. To find what happens next, stay tuned for the next video.